It was during these terrible times of massacre, torture, and desperate escapes that Daniel's fame as an Indian fighter began to spread all over the land. He was appointed a lieutenant, later captain, to lead a group of men in protecting the widely scattered forts and settlements along the border. He was so successful at routing Indian war parties that he is held greatly responsible for driving the Cherokees far down the Tennessee.
Isn't it strange that the man who fought the Cherokee so valiantly and had such a hand in defeating them should only a short time later be sitting with the Cherokee chiefs in a big powwow?
Perhaps not so strange. Although he was a formidable enemy, he often won the respect of his Indian adversaries.
We sit now, O brother, by the council fire. We chiefs and leaders, 1,200 strong, have agreed to listen to what you have to say. It is time now you speak of what you have in your hearts.
As you know, my Indian brothers, I have long planned and dreamed of a settlement of white men in Kentucky. But I have not had the money to buy the necessary provisions and supplies needed to build such a settlement. And then there's the question of the rights to the land. This must be settled. The red man and the white man must live once again in peace together. I have brought with me to this powwow Mr. Richard Henderson and some of his colleagues of North Carolina. Mr. Henderson will tell you of the Transylvania Company. He will explain to you what his new company wants to do.
O great Conestoga, little Carpenter, Dragging Canoe, and all you mighty chiefs of the great Cherokee people, my men and I are honored to be among you at this sacred council fire. We know that only one man, a man whom both you and we honor, Daniel Boone, could have arranged such a meeting. We represent a new company, the Transylvania Company, which will make possible opening up your country so settlers may come to farm. We are speaking of peaceful settlers who will bring no harm to your people. We do not seek to take anything away from you unlawfully. We do not propose to operate as some have in the past, taking from the Cherokee what is rightfully his, without payment of any kind. If you will let us have your tribal hunting grounds, we will pay you $50,000 worth of guns, utensils, cloth, clothing, and ornaments. I do not have to tell you that these are materials you need, and you have difficulty finding the money to buy. What we are suggesting is a bargain which will benefit both the white man and the red man, who we hope will live from this day forth as brothers.
The 1,200 chiefs sat in their paint, eagle feathers, and white buffalo robes. There was silence. Then they began to deliberate among themselves. Questions were put to Boone and Henderson from time to time. Then more deliberation. Finally, Little Carpenter and some of the other chiefs persuaded the majority to sign away their hunting grounds, in spite of the anger of Dragging Canoe, who fiercely denounced their action as grievous folly. When all the feasting and ceremony had ended, and the bargain had been agreed upon, Dragging Canoe came up behind Boone and whispered in his ear,
Brother, it is good land we have sold you, but you will find it hard to hold.
When Dragging Canoe warned that a dark cloud hung over the land, he spoke with a prophet's tongue. Few red men listened to him, however, and fewer whites.
I have always believed that Daniel was so wrapped up in his own dream of settling this rich wilderness that he didn't realize what a bad bargain the Indians had made. Daniel was always an honest man, and I'm sure he acted in good faith. But the fact remains that the Cherokees learned when the goods were finally distributed among them that they had been cheated.
Still, it must be said that the treaty was fairly come by as things were handled in those days. The Cherokees knew they had no real title to the country, and they knew that the sale would not prevent their hunting there.
Of course, Richard Henderson didn't see Kentucky in Daniel's terms. Both men wanted it settled. Both men were interested in land. But to Daniel, the new country meant freedom, good hunting, and a few neighbors willing to face peril together. To Henderson and the Transylvania Company, Kentucky meant large profits and the power of having a whole series of settlements under its control. Daniel's was a personal dream. Henderson's almost imperial. They were unlikely partners. Immediately, Henderson put Boone in charge of a party to cut a route through to the new possessions.
And that was the start of the famous Wilderness Road, which was used for many years afterwards by pioneers heading west.
And what a job they did under Daniel's watchful direction. At first, it was merely a path fit only for pack horses. But its grades, the selection of its route through the passes and over the rough country were masterful. Boone took advantage of buffalo roads and Indian trails, connecting them up and cutting through the forests. 2 men were wounded, one of them fatally by a raiding Shawnee war party. Still, they went ahead with determination.
I was with Boone and his party, and I'll never forget the day we came down the beautiful Kentucky River. When we reached Otter Creek, some of the axemen got together and built a few makeshift cabins. We were all tired, but our spirits were high. The country was everything Daniel had promised. Each of us went to lay claim to a piece of property that we'd build on later. And after that, instead of resting like you'd think sensible men would after such a journey, many of us went hunting. We'd never seen such plentiful game in our lives.
Well, I don't mean to criticize, 'cause I wasn't there myself, but I heard tell that Boone was pretty angry with some of you.
He was that, and he had a right to be. Many of the men killed the larger game so wastefully and recklessly that soon a man had to walk 20 miles to find a deer or a bear, and that's the meat our lives depended on. And that wasn't all. Daniel knew we might be subject to Indian attack at any time. The Indians had been keeping an eye on us as we came in, and they were getting uneasy. There was no formal declaration of war, but there were a number of small bands of Indians in the vicinity just watching and waiting.
Men, I plead with you once more. We're only a small group, and we must protect ourselves until Henderson arrives with more men and supplies. And we don't know when that'll be. Now, I can understand you're wanting to stake out your piece of ground, and I know many of you are tired and just want to take it easy, but we can't. Soon our families will begin to pour over the Wilderness Road to join us. We must start work immediately on a permanent fort in case of Indian attack. All we have worked so hard for will go up in smoke if we leave ourselves defenseless like this. We could be wiped out in minutes. Now, please, are you with me?
We're with you. I'll go with you.
Good. Now that we've picked the best site for the fort, what we need is a party to lay out the cabins, walls, and corner towers. We want another gang to start planting rows of upright logs side by side. These will be the outer stockade. Now remember, men, there's no time to lose. We must begin at once.
While you pioneers were building your fort in the settlement that was to be known as Boonesboro, a lot was happening the other side of the mountain. It was then 1775, remember? And the American Revolution was approaching at a gallop.
Well, we were playing our part in the development of the country too, you know. With all our families arriving, you can say we really started the westward movement. And Boonesboro wasn't the only settlement for long. But even the folks in the other settlements knew Daniel, and he knew lots of them. He said their courage was mighty, and their characters as strong as hickory.
Some of them became national heroes too, like Daniel. You've heard of the famous scout and Indian fighter, Simon Kenton, haven't you?
I sure have. Why, one time when the Shawnees were attacking Boonesboro, and they were right fond of doing that, Kenton and Daniel got ambushed. Daniel fell to the ground, his ankle shattered by a bullet. And just when the Indians...
I know that story too. Just when a warrior was about to tomahawk Daniel, Kenton shot him.
And fought off a whole pack of savages. Then he made a dash for the fort carrying Dan'l on his back.
That's the way the story goes, all right.
What do you mean that's the way the story goes? It happened just that way. I know, 'cause I was there. But Dan'l wasn't always that lucky, though, when it came to Indians, I mean. I remember that time he was captured by the Shawnee.
He was ambushed, wasn't he? By part of a war party under Chief Blackfish. Funny thing was the Shawnee were on their way to make a surprise attack on Boonesboro.
That sly old fox talked Chief Blackfish into leaving Boonesboro alone until the spring. And what's even more remarkable, he convinced the Indians they ought to spare his life and the lives of his men.
Yes, but in exchange he had to agree that he and the men would go along with them as their prisoners. The men were luckier than Dan'l. They were ransomed and free to go back to Boonesboro. But in spite of the large ransom that was offered for Boone, Blackfish insisted Dan'l was his personal property and was not for sale.
Look lively. Someone's approaching the fort.
Can't see too well yet, but it looks like whoever he is, he's alone.
Doesn't look like an Indian from here, but we best be careful. Could be some kind of trap. And we've had plenty of those here at Boonesboro.
You know, if we hadn't heard months ago that Dan'l Boone was dead, he sure walks like Dan'l. But it couldn't be.
It is! It is Dan'l Boone! Just like he'd come back again from the dead. Well, I declare. Dan'l! Dan'l!
Oh, Daniel, we've given you up for lost.
Ryan Calloway.
Oh, it's good to see you, Dan'l. What happened to you for all these months? We thought we'd never see you again.
I spent these many long months as the adopted son of Chief Blackfish. I finally got my chance to escape and make my way here. There's no time to lose. 500 warriors are preparing to attack Boonesboro. I heard them planning it, and I knew the settlement would be unprepared.
The news of the coming Indian raid roused all us settlers to action. We made ready for an attack. The swift, short Indian attack we were familiar with. But weeks passed and no Indians were seen. We learned later that Dan'l's escape had delayed them. When the Indians did finally appear, it wasn't like any Indian attack we had ever seen before. They came openly over the hill, carrying a British flag. The Indians and the British had become allies by this time. One of the braves advanced on the fort waving a white banner and asking for Dan'l.
Remember, white brother Daniel Boone, we spared your life, and we let you persuade us to cease in our attack on Boonesboro, but only till the spring. It is now spring, and it is your turn to keep your part of the bargain and surrender Boonesboro.
My red brothers do not need to attack Boonesboro. Of what value could it be to them? There are women and children here. Surely my brothers do not want to harm helpless women and children.
It is useless for us to talk further, white brother. Come with us. Chief Blackfish wishes to speak with his adopted son.
Dan'l went out alone. The danger was great, but he was playing a desperate game for time. This meeting between Dan'l Boone and Blackfish was the first of several conferences during the next anxious hours. In the other powwows, each was joined by some of his men.
What were all of you in the fort doing then? Wouldn't you rather have fought than give in to Blackfish's terms?
Yes, we sure would rather fight, after what we had gone through to build the settlement. While Blackfish promised us if we surrendered we'd be allowed to go in peace to the British headquarters in Detroit, we didn't feel we could trust him. Luckily, the Shawnee didn't know how badly outnumbered we were. At least 6 Indians to every white man.
Now I remember. How was it you were able to fool the Indians into believing there were more of you?
You know what we did? We had all the women in the stockade dress up as men. They kept parading by the open gate right where the Indians could see them. We even dressed some dummies the same way. Of course, the Indians were tricky too. At one of the powwows, they tried to drag some of our men away as prisoners.
I guess that's when the siege of Boonesboro began in earnest. And I heard tell it was the fiercest and longest of the many sieges known to Kentucky.
lasted 10 terrible days and nights, from September the 8th to September 17th, 1778. I'm not likely to forget those dates. Those Indians attempted to take the fort by every means of warfare known to them. And inside the fort, we fought like people fighting for our lives, our homes, our dreams. We were exhausted, but we couldn't risk sleeping, and our supplies were running low.
I guess one of the worst moments came when the Indians started throwing burning bundles of wood over the walls into the fort.
Fire! Fire!
Merciful Lord, there are dozens of blazes, and we're almost out of water. And they got us for sure now. How can we hope to put all these fires out?
It's probably useless, but we still gotta try. We gotta try as long as the water holds out. Fire! Fire over here!
They're all over, and they're catching. The whole stockade's ablaze. Maybe we ought to surrender. It's better than being burned to death.
It's no use, it's the end. We're licked good and proper this time. We can only pray that those savages don't mean to kill us, but it's really too much to hope for.
Look! I think I felt a drop of rain. I'm sure I did. Yes, there's another.
It's raining. It's really raining. It's pouring. And it's putting out the fires. And the good Lord has saved us, at least for this night.
Still, the battle waged for a few more days. Then, one morning, there was silence. We couldn't believe it. The Indians had stopped firing. Daniel took a couple of scouts out of the fort. They came back with the report that the Indians had been digging a tunnel to come right in the middle of the fort. But the merciful rain had not only put out the fires, it had softened the ground so much that the tunnel caved in.
And that was too much for the Indians.
Yep, they quit in disgust during the night. Now it was morning, and there wasn't an Indian to be seen anywhere. Boonesboro had been spared.
But soon even Boonesboro became too crowded for Daniel Boone. Always in search of elbow room and new worlds to conquer, he moved his family to a more remote part of Kentucky, and later all the way west to Missouri.
Even as an old man, and he lived to be 86, Daniel Boone was still pursuing his dream of expanding frontiers, a dream that nourished him all his life. And that was the great legacy Daniel Boone left to America.